dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yo, what's good, original crew? It's your boy DJ New Kid, your girl
Sierra Nicole.
Back on the channel. We got the most feared girl in Mexico. I'm gonna put some respect on it. Mexico.
Okay. Most feared girl. What's she doing?
What's girl in Spanish?
Start with a
I know abuela is your auntie.
Hold on. I think it started in.
Says the girl that took how many? How many years? You see.
It started.
That's why ain't no point of taking all these classes.
Oh, started C. What am I thinking about that starts with an N?
Chica.
What if it started with an
Chica.
N?
Damn, why the fuck I couldn't think of that? The most feared chica in Mexico.
So what is N that I'm talking about?
What's grandma?
Why?
Abuela is your grandma. Why I say Tito and was it Tia? Tito, I know Tito is what, uncle, right? And so what is it, Tia?
What? Auntie? Yeah, you just replaced the
A and O.
A and O.
I took Spanish for a year and failed, but I still got my Spanish level on yours. So
I don't know what I was talking about.
And you took Spanish, 2 years Spanish in high school and 2 years Spanish in college, and we still on the same level. Ain't that matter? Yes!
I learned the same shit in both.
What? It's me again! Thank you! Man, what that means, let's go get to it. Make sure you check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go, man. You want the first part, you gotta do it. Check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video,
like it with a thumbs up.
Hey, don't waste y'all classes, man. If you really taste Spanish and take some away from it, man.
I did. I took some stuff away.
I knew, remember,
but that's the
none
thing.
Of it.
I was like, right when I got out, I knew things, but I don't use it every day. I don't remember much of anything.
Count to 10. No,
I'll do it later. I can't count to 10.
This story has a very graphic ending, so viewer discretion is advised. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. So if that's of interest to you, please put a single metal fork in the like button's microwave, set it for 99 minutes, hit start, and then leave. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications.
You violate. You know that shit gonna catch on fire. You gonna kill 99 minutes? Can a microwave even be set on 99? I ain't never tried though. I'm gonna try it.
So you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Let's get into today's story. The Sierra Madre Oriental is a major mountain range that starts on the southern border of Texas and Mexico and cuts 700 miles south through the northeastern section of Mexico. About halfway down this mountain range on the eastern face lies a series of caves, and situated below these caves at the foot of the mountains are several small villages that are very isolated, and they're populated primarily with illiterate poor farmers. One night back in May of 1963, a 14-year-old boy named Sebastian Guerrero, who lived in one of these small isolated villages, decided to go for a walk up in the mountains, and he wanted to go explore the different caves. Now, this was something he did fairly regularly because there was a local rumor that there was actually hidden treasure in these different caves. Now, it's unclear if Sebastian literally believed that or if that was just kind of an excuse to go have a look around himself. But regardless, he headed out of his house and he began walking up the mountain towards these caves. The entrance to these caves were a couple hundred feet up the mountainside, and then each of the various entrances, which ranged in size from fairly small to enormous, were spread out a couple of miles in each direction. So Sebastian starts walking up the mountain towards the first entrance he can see. It's dark outside, he's got no flashlight, he's just walking up, and as he's walking, he notices off to his right, fairly far away from where he was, there was light coming out of one of the cave entrances. And he had never recalled seeing light coming out of any of these caves. Nobody ever went in these caves, especially not at night. And so his interest was piqued, and he decided he would kind of abandon his original plan to just kind of look around near his village, and he would actually walk all the way over to that lit up cave and see what was going on. So he turned right and began kind of walking uphill at an angle in the direction of this lit up cave. And so as he's walking, he's getting farther and farther away from the village where he lives, and he's starting to hear sounds coming out of this lit up cave entrance. It sounds like a person potentially, either they're laughing or they're screaming. He doesn't really know. He's thinking, maybe someone's having a party inside one of these caves. He has no idea. But after he gets maybe 200 or 300 feet away from this entrance, he realizes it's definitely a person, and they're definitely screaming. And it does not sound like they're screaming out of joy. It sounds like they're screaming because they're scared or they're in pain. And as he's getting closer and closer and closer to this cave, his anxiety is starting to ramp up because he's really starting to be frightened by what he's hearing, and he's starting to realize there's more than one person inside of this cave. In addition to the person that is screaming out, there also sounds to be a large contingent of other people that are either singing in unison or chanting in unison, but some group of people are doing something in unison while some other person is screaming out. And so he's really starting to get nervous about this cave, but he just can't help feeling curious about what was going on. And so he just continued walking until he was maybe 10 feet away from the entrance to this cave, and he plopped down behind a rock. And so he's not really sure if it's a good idea to look. He doesn't want to be spotted by whoever is in there, but finally he kind of works up the courage. He takes a deep breath, and he slips out from behind the rock, and he goes right to the edge of this big opening, maybe 10 foot across opening, and he peeks his head right around the edge of the opening, and he looks inside, and what he sees causes him to just freeze in terror. Then his survival instincts just kick in, and he turns and he starts running down the mountain away from this cave. He has no idea if he's been spotted or not, but he's sensing that someone could be chasing him, and so he is just running as if his life depended on it. And he would not run back to his village. Instead, he would run nearly 10 miles to the nearest police station. And when he gets there, he busts through the front doors, and he's totally hysterical. He's drenched in sweat, and the police officers are totally caught off guard, and so they're trying to tell him to calm down. And so Sebastian finally would kind of compose himself, but then he just was not able to describe what he had seen inside of this cave. Whatever he had seen, he knew it was bad, but the words were just escaping him. And so the way he described it to police was he basically thought he saw vampires. And as soon as he began describing vampires to the police, they're thinking to themselves, okay, I don't know what's going on with this kid, but this just cannot be serious. And so they consoled him and kind of calmed him down and said, look, kid, I don't know what you're talking about. If there's any news that comes out of something happening in the cave that's bad, I'm sure we'll hear about it and we'll follow up. But for now, we're just going to bring you back to your village. And so at this, Sebastian was really frustrated, and he was kind of pleading with the police, like, no, you got to take me seriously. There's something bad happening in this cave. Someone could be hurt. Someone could be dying. I don't know, but you got to go to this cave. You got to go see what's going on. But the police at this point, they're just not really interested. And so they ultimately do just drive him back to his village. And so he goes back into his home. The police go back.
Damn, Peter. What if the police already knew? What if they in on it? A lot of towns like this, you know what I'm saying, especially back in the day, they used to be paid off, you know what I'm saying? We ain't gonna act like that shit ain't never happened before. It happened here in the States. It happens overseas. Happens all over the place. Probably still happens to this day. You know what I'm saying? Money talk. You know what I'm saying? Hey, some police officers ain't paid enough. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? For the work they do. They put their life on the line. So a lot of them take cuts. They'll take a little, all right, bro, I'm going to just
under the table. Huh?
Look the other way. Y'all gonna do y'all. Somebody come back and report. We'll act like we interested, but we'll pass it on. You never know.
station, and everyone just kind of goes to bed for the night. The next day, when Sebastian wakes up, he just can't shake what he saw inside of that cave. And so he would once again run back to the police station. And when he got there, he began pleading with the police, like, you gotta go see what's inside of this cave. I'm telling you, there's something awful in there. And this time, one of the police officers, his name was Luis Martinez, he would say, okay, kid, bring me to this cave and I'll have a look around. And so Luis and Sebastian, who was very grateful, they left the police station, they hopped in a police car, and they took off. And then later on in the day, the other police officers, who were not really paying attention to this cave thing, they realized that Luis and the boy had not returned yet, and Luis had not checked in via his radio. And so at some point in the afternoon that day, the other officers began calling out to Luis. They began calling him on his radio and trying to figure out what's going on, but he wasn't responding. And so the police thought that was odd, but they thought, you know what, I'm sure he'll be back soon. There's got to be an explanation for this. But the rest of the day would go by without Luis reaching out to them, and he didn't return with the boy. And so by that evening, the other officers were genuinely concerned that, something bad had happened to their colleague. And so they tried calling Luis a few more times on the radio. It didn't work. And so the officers, they made their way over to Sebastian's village, and they found Sebastian's family, believing that, maybe the boy was back and he could give some insight into where Luis went. But when they talked to Sebastian's family, they would say, hey, he's not back yet either. And so both Sebastian and Luis at this point have not talked to anyone all day, and they are missing. And so the police at this point, they realize this is an emergency. They need to figure out where these two went.
Now y'all care. The boy came and tried to tell y'all. Then nobody want to listen. Then one person said, all right, let me go check it out with you. Now he gone missing. Then, instead of jumping right on it,
right, y'all wait all day, however long. I don't know what all day is, but...
Well, let's not even follow up what the boy
hours.
said. We're going to go to the boy village and see if they even seen the boy.
Y'all
ain't seen the boy either? Oh, shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? No hesitation.
You tell me you seen some vampires or whatever, some weird. I ain't going by
vampires,
myself.
Girl?
Huh?
You believe in vampires?
I mean... I believe in...
Don't tell you believe in vampires.
No, I mean, that's just how he described them, but whatever he's seen is something crazy, freaky, like... Not vampires, though.
So they were kind of understaffed, and so they contacted the Mexican army, and they explained, we're missing one of our colleagues, we're missing a child from this village. And so the Mexican army would actually send out a military unit to assist them in going and finding these two people. And so the unit, they show up later that night, and the police and the Mexican army, they head out to where this cave was. And when they saw what was inside the cave, it would shock the world. To understand what was found inside of this cave, we need to go back 6 months to December of 1962. That month, two brothers, Santos and Cayetano Hernandez, who made their living basically traveling around Mexico, stealing from people and swindling people, they decided they were going to pull off their biggest heist yet. They were going to rip off an entire town. Their plan was to go into a small, fairly isolated village that was populated primarily with poor and illiterate people, and they would go in there and they would convince the villagers that they, the brothers, were actually prophets of an exiled Incan god. And if these villagers did everything they said, they would make them rich. And so the village the brothers identified as their target was a place called La Yerba Buena, which was located right at the foot of the Sierra Madre Oriental, right below where that cave was that Luis and Sebastian went to investigate. And La Yerba Buena was exactly what the brothers were looking for. It was home to only about 20 families that were all very poor and illiterate, and they were very suggestible. And so right before the new year, the Hernandez brothers strolled into La Yerba Buena, and they put on this very dramatic show explaining how they were the prophets of the Incan god. And these two brothers, they were very charismatic and they were excellent salesmen. And so they really sold the lie. And these villagers, who were very vulnerable and cut off really from the rest of the world, they believed them. They thought this was their big break. They're going to be rich. We just have to do whatever they say. And so almost immediately, the villagers effectively became the Hernandez brothers' slaves. They would give them anything they wanted and do anything they wanted. But after a couple of months of this, some of the villagers started to be frustrated with the Hernandez brothers, the prophets, because it seemed like they were not really working towards making the villagers rich. Instead, it just seemed like they were horribly mistreating the villagers. And it just didn't feel like this was a relationship that was benefiting the villagers. And so when this sentiment began to kind of make its way around the 70-ish people who lived in La Yerba Buena, the brothers picked up on it, and they could have, at that point, just kind of abandoned their gig. At this point, you know, they've robbed the town dry. There's nothing left for them to give to the brothers. But for whatever reason, the brothers decide instead to salvage their operation. And so
You think people still do that to this day? Like prey on little small town folks? Because they don't understand, they're kind of naive and they can come into town.
Possibly. I just don't. I'm trying to think if I've heard anything, you know.
I say this.
Recently or stuff like that.
Not necessarily like this, but I do believe because what's kind of going on back home, I do believe kind of corporations prey on small towns.
Oh.
They like, hey, let's go to these little small towns. Mm-hmm. Let's promise them this, and this. Because they have been over backwards and folks. Yeah. Because folks, especially small town people, they like crave money. Yeah. Because they are not used to having an influencer. They're not used to even people around them being like very wealthy. You know what I'm saying? Like back home, probably the most wealthiest person probably got a house like 600,000, 700,000. You know what I'm saying? So for us, that's like where we at. That's the typical home. Yeah. Typical home, 600,000, 700,000. Back home, that's like you the rich person in the, you know what I'm saying, in town. Like, oh shit, you rich as fuck. They got money. Yeah. In reality, like they probably just they good. Yeah. But back home, they rich as hell. Here, they like, you just a normal middle class person. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy, but it's the truth. But I do feel like today it's in different forms. It's disguised
in different forms. Yeah.
And they prey on the weak. They prey on the people that don't know and understand.
Facts.
But for whatever reason, the brothers decide instead to salvage their operation. And so the brothers, they leave the village and they go to a city that's relatively close by, and they recruit this young woman named Magdalena Solis. She was a prostitute, and they tell her, hey, you know, we have this con we're doing in La Yerba Buena where we're pretending to be prophets of this Incan god, and they're starting not to believe our lie, and so we need you, if you're willing, to come with us and pretend to be an actual Incan goddess. And so when you show up, they'll know that we were serious, that we have a direct line to the Incan gods and goddesses, and they'll believe us again, and they'll fall back in line. And so Magdalena, she likes the idea of participating in this con, and so she agrees to do it in exchange for some money. And so she, along with the Hernandez brothers and Magdalena's brother, his name was Eliezer, and he functioned as her pimp, those four people, they went back to Yerba Buena, and when they...
Yo, brother, yo, pimp. Yo, brothers, yo, pimp.
I ain't never.
But I ain't gonna say that. Even though it's shocking and surprising, I'm sure that happens a lot.
But I said, I've never heard.
Do you know a hoe? Do you know a pimp personally? Simple. Come on now, let's be real, bro. No, you do not.
I do.
No, you don't.
And he functioned as her pimp. Those four people, they went back to Yerba Buena, and when they got there, the Hernandez brothers snuck Magdalena past all the villagers up to that cave up in the mountains. And they put her in the back of the cave, they kind of hid her behind some rocks, and they dressed her up in an Incan goddess costume. And then once she was in there, the brothers went back down to the village, and they rounded all the villagers up and said, come on, let's go up to the cave. We have a special ceremony for you. And so the villagers made their way up to this cave, and once they were all inside, the Hernandez brothers used some basic magic tricks and created basically a smoke screen. Once they had this smoke screen kind of billowing in the back of the cave, they secretly signaled to Magdalena, who was behind the smoke screen, and she knew that was her cue, and she leapt through the smoke and she presented herself to the villagers for the first time, and she declared herself to be a reincarnated Incan goddess. And if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to kill you. And so the message she was sending to the villagers was so intense, they completely believed that this was an Incan goddess, and therefore this was not a ruse. The brothers were not lying to them. This was all very real. There's a real goddess in front of us. And so they immediately fell right back in line. The plan worked exactly as the brothers wanted it to. However, there was an element of their plan they could not possibly have accounted for. And that was what Magdalena did next. Even though Magdalena was fully aware that what she was getting herself into was an act, it was a con, It was not real. Despite that, as soon as she jumped through the smoke and was standing in front of the villagers for the first time and saw the looks on these people's faces as they stared up at her, and she saw their reverence for her, it had this profound impact on her. This is a woman who's never had control in her life. She's been a prostitute since a young age, and here she is, the most powerful person in the room, and it's not even close. And it got to her head. And so when she left the cave that night, she literally believed she was a reincarnated Incan goddess, and she was not a merciful one. Within the first few days of her stay at La Yerba Buena, Magdalena used threats of violence on the villagers to completely take over the village. She very easily supplanted the Hernandez brothers at the top of the power structure. Now, the Hernandez brothers probably were quite surprised to see this happen because they were expecting Magdalena to play more of a prop role to keep them in power, not the other way around. But ultimately, they kind of just went along with it because through Magdalena's control over the villagers, they were able to continue to exploit the villagers. And so they were getting what they wanted out of this relationship. Within a few weeks of being in La Yerba Buena, Magdalena was not only abusing every villager in every horrible way imaginable, she also was becoming completely delusional. She convinced herself that in order to survive, she needed to start drinking blood. And so she demanded all the villagers provide her with blood, and so in fear of retribution, the villagers began slaughtering all of their farm animals and their own pets so Magdalena could drink their blood. For weeks and weeks and weeks, the horrible abuse Magdalena would dole out on the villagers would continue, and these blood rituals would continue. And then finally, sometime in April, 2 of the villagers decided, you know what? I've had enough. I don't believe Magdalena is actually an Incan goddess. I don't believe the Hernandez brothers are actually prophets. I think this is all a scam. And so they decided the way they would handle this is they were just going to flee the village. Now, somehow their plans to run away got out, and the Hernandez brothers found out about it, and they, in turn, told Magdalena about it. And when she heard the news, she immediately told everyone in the village to make their way up to the cave for a special ceremony. So all the villagers, including the 2 people that were planning on running away, they made their way up to the cave, and once everyone was inside, Magdalena walked to the front of the group, and she pointed at the 2 dissenters, the 2 people that were planning on running, and she demanded that the rest of the villagers kill them. And on the spot, all of the other villagers jumped on top of the 2 dissenters, and they lynched them. They beat them to death in the cave. And then after these 2 people have been killed, Magdalena orders their bodies be strung up on these 2 pikes she had set up in the back of the cave because she knew what she was going to be doing up in this cave. And so after these 2 bodies were strung up on these pikes, Magdalena grabs a chalice and she walks over to these 2 bodies and she presses the chalice up against their bodies where they're bleeding from, and she fills it up and then she drinks from the chalice. And at this point, everything changed. Suddenly, Magdalena understood that it wasn't good enough to just be drinking animal blood. That was not enough to keep her, a goddess, alive.
She is. That's a crazy. That crazy bitch out there again. That's that crazy.
And it's just like that. This switch in your head.
Bro, they gave her something she always desired. Power.
Well,
no, technically, think about it. She was a prostitute. Prostitutes always, the pimp makes the prostitute feel as though she's powerless. Mm-hmm. The prostitute is actually the one in control because she is the one who has the vagina. Mm-hmm. She has what you are seeking for. You pay her for what she's always had power.
She's always had it.
But she always had somebody that was above her.
Yeah.
Now, y'all have showed that she's the person.
Yeah.
She's always been wanting that.
Yeah.
So y'all literally gave her what she desired.
Point, everything changed. Suddenly, Magdalena understood that it wasn't good enough to just be drinking animal blood. That was not enough to keep her, a goddess, alive. She now could only consume human blood. And so for the next several weeks, Periodically, Magdalena would order everyone in the village to go back up to the cave for a blood ritual, which they all knew what this entailed. This no longer had anything to do with animals. This was human blood rituals. She would order them up and they would have no idea who was going to be the sacrifice. And so all these people that get inside this dark cave, and then Magdalena shows up and she stands in front of them, and after kind of looking them over, she identifies her next sacrifice, and out of fear, the other villagers, who were the friends and family of the victim, would launch themselves on top of the chosen sacrifice and lynch them in the cave. And then afterwards, their body would be strung up on one of the pikes, and Magdalena would walk over with her chalice. She would fill it with blood and she would drink it. And so this would go on and on for several weeks. And one of the most distressing aspects of these human sacrifices is that as she did more and more and more of them, Magdalena got it in her head that beating the sacrifice to death before consuming their blood was spoiling the blood in some way. And so what she began doing was she would have the other villagers beat the sacrifice into submission, and then she would have the sacrifice strung up to one of the pikes while they were still alive, and then she would carve their heart out while they were alive, and then she would drink their blood. So in May of 1963, when Sebastian, the 14-year-old boy, when he poked his head around and looked into that cave, he watched one of these sacrifices having their heart cut out, and he didn't know what to make of it, and so he ran to the police, and then the next day, he and the police officer, Luis Martinez, they would go back to the cave, and Magdalena and her cult would spot them, capture them, and drag them both into the cave, and both of them would be ritualistically sacrificed. They would have their hearts cut out, and Magdalena would drink their blood. When the police and army arrived in La Yerba Buena, it was a ghost town because all of the villagers had been ordered up to the cave where they had barricaded themselves inside with weapons because Magdalena probably knew there was going to be a big police response because one of their officers has gone missing out here. They're bound to be found out. And so when the police and the army reach the cave, there's this big shootout with all of the villagers. And during the shootout, the majority of the villagers are killed. Also, the Hernandez brothers, they're also killed in the shootout. And then after the shootout stopped, the police and the army would go into this cave and they would discover the pikes, the bloody pikes that are in the back of the cave with bits of human remains all over the ground. And then they would leave the cave and they would search the town and they would find the remains of Luis and Sebastian outside a particular shack. And then inside the shack was Magdalena and her brother Eliezer. They were still alive. They were trying to hide from the authorities, and so they would be arrested. It's believed Magdalena sacrificed and drank the blood of at least 15 of the villagers over a 6-week period. However, the only remains to be positively identified were Luis Martinez and Sebastian Guerrero. Ultimately, Magdalena and her brother Eliezer were sentenced to 50 years in prison, and all of the surviving villagers who participated in these sacrifices or who participated in the shootout with police and the army, they were given 30 years in prison. Amazingly, none of the villagers ever testified against Magdalena or her brother, despite the fact they were almost certainly offered reduced sentences in exchange for their testimony. Clearly, they were more terrified of the Incan goddess than they were terrified of the prospect of 30 years in prison. Although the exact date of when this happened is not known, Magdalena would eventually die behind bars. So that's going to do it, guys. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this,
That's the crazy ass story, bro. Crazy as hell. Sierra. I'm like, what the fuck you just did? I'm like, bro, what is you just?
I'm just lost for words. I'm just like.
And all y'all give was 30 years for killing 15 villagers on top of Sebastian and
Right.
and Louise, right?
Louise, yeah.
Or was Sebastian and Louise included in the 15?
In the 15.
Even though it's 15 plus.
Regardless,
I said 15 plus. But so
still.
you're telling me they only
Even if it
50
was
years.
one person, two people.
You telling me they only got 30 years?
They got 30 and she only got 50.
Well, the Hernandez brothers, and then her punk ass didn't. Lord forgive me. I know she dead, R.I.P. But her ass really gonna sit in the shack while they are fighting and being killed. Your ass ain't nowhere to be found because your ass.
You and your pimp brother.
Pimp. She ain't been shit but a prostitute. Been pimping her
That
out.
is so crazy. Y'all already messed up in the head. That alone. That should have told you something. Your brother, your pimp.
Yeah. They should have said what the mindset is.
Like,
of
that
these
alone
two.
was
Then on
crazy.
top of that, like the Hernandez brothers, y'all dumb anyway going out here and getting people that y'all don't even know. Hey,
preying on people.
We need help. Instead of just evacuating, just leave. Y'all done already robbed them. Just leave. Like, at this point, y'all get what y'all want. Leave. Let the people be. You know what I'm saying? You didn't have to do more than what you already have done. You should have just left. Move the fuck on.
Took it too far.
It's too far.
Y'all
bro.
went too far.
And then for her, like, all right, you killing the people, property. You know what I'm saying? They cattle.
Just everything. Yeah.
Like, why? Like, you already is taking that from them, killing and slaughter. I ain't gonna hold you, bro. We didn't sacrifice too much for not to be seeing nothing. Y'all get.
It's already been 6 months. What y'all gaining from it? Nothing.
Y'all ain't got nothing. How long we supposed to be giving you everything? Because you're taking everything that we even have. The cattle, that's not only food, but that's technically our money because that's our product. That's what we can be able to survive off of. I'm telling you, see, does that not remind you of like big corporation moving into small town? They take up the land. They convince them to sell the land. Mm-hmm. What y'all have is value. Mm-hmm. Then they start buying up your homes. Mm-hmm. That's what y'all have of value. And y'all thinking y'all finna really gain something out of it. Not knowing y'all ain't getting this shit. You know what I'm saying? Y'all losing. You get what I'm saying? Like, that is prime example. Only thing, and then they have y'all eventually switch on each other, and y'all be wanting to take each other out.
Take each other out, take each other down.
You know what I'm saying? Does that not remind you of like big corporation stuff? It still goes on to this day, just in different form and fashion. Yeah. Like the Hernandez brothers, they were the cowards. They were the ones who come scout, and then they bring in the big head man, and they're like, oh shit, I didn't know they were gonna do this. Yeah. Now they gone. Cause they was a sacrifice. Yep. They can easily be fired. You know what I'm saying? And replaced. So my thing is, what if her and her brother never got caught? What if they dipped? They should have dipped out. But I think it was the fact that having so much power. Mm-hmm. I don't even think she wasn't gonna escape. Even if they could have got away with it, I don't think she would have even left because they were already like, we can't leave because where are we going back to? Being a hoe. Being a pimp, because I had to pimp you out for us to even survive.
I cannot talk. Or would they have went like maybe found like a different village or something somewhere and continue doing the same thing because now she done got so like. No,
because
you don't think so.
You still would have need the Hernandez brothers because they the ones who came in.
As prophets and set everything up. Set the tone for everything. Yeah.
So when they brought her along, it was easy because they already have mind for y'all to even believe it. And now they got y'all believing it. That was the icing on the cake.
Child.
But you know how sick you have to be to literally be drinking blood? And then I feel so bad for Sebastian because he went to get help. Only to be done. Because obviously somebody probably did peep him.
Yeah.
And probably told them, so they were already waiting on y'all to come back. And they were waiting for y'all to attack.
Or maybe the way that they went in. The second time. Somebody probably did see them, but the way that they probably went in too, maybe did they just go right in trying to, see.
But with Louise by himself,
that's what I'm like. No way he could have. Y'all took forever. I mean, good thing that everyone was called.
They probably was done for from the jump.
Yeah, anyway. But yeah, facts. But good thing that everyone was called. But at the same time, it's just still sad that you doing your job, following up on something that someone,
that y'all refuse to go follow up on just because
I'm like, to.
All right, I don't want to just leave the board not knowing. Let's actually go investigate the situation. And now I'm dead. And then one of the worst ways to go out.
And just imagine if Sebastian didn't see what he's seen and tried to get help.
How long
would this have went on?
And y'all would never have got the riches that y'all believed in. All y'all died. All y'all died. The whole village wiped out. Well, or went to jail, but 30 years, depending on y'all age, wiped out.
For what?
For somebody else greed and that's crazy, bro. And now y'all literally have to live with y'all saying, because it's a small village. Y'all all know each other. Y'all grew up with each other. Y'all family. That's a small village like those. Yeah. Most of them, everybody's related some type of way.
And then it's still the control that she got over y'all, the brainwashing or whatever. Y'all didn't even take y'all was like, no, we just gonna take our small communities. We just gonna take our time. Honey, no. Y'all don't know her. Y'all don't owe her nothing.
Facts, man.
Great. That's crazy.
Hey, man, with that being said, make sure y'all spam us up in the comments. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below for us. But as always, y'all know how it go, man. I do go with the name DJ. This is we are.
Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my folks. Dollar.